I'll never forget the day my parents kicked me out. I had no idea that moment would set the stage for something so much bigger than just a heated argument in our kitchen. I'd always been the odd one out in the family, but that day I became the target of their frustration, their disappointment, and their anger. Looking back, maybe it was the universe's way of pushing me to stop playing by their rules. For as long as I can remember, my family expected me to follow the same strict path as my older brother. He was always the golden child, handsome, athletic, and a total people pleaser. Meanwhile, I was more of a dreamer, I hated the 9-to-5 grind they preached about, constantly pushing for grades, titles, and achievements that didn't speak to my soul. But no one cared about that. They wanted results. Fast. The tension had been building for months, maybe even years. My father, a man of very few words, never showed much affection or interest in what I was doing. His idea of support was pushing me harder to fit into the mold of what he thought was best. He had his plans, his vision, and there was no room for anything else. My mom, on the other hand, would act like everything was fine on the surface, but I could tell she was just as frustrated with my lack of direction. One afternoon, after yet another argument about my future, they crossed a line. It wasn't just the usual disappointment or the scolding. It was a complete rejection. They told me I had to leave, just like that. Figure it out. You're not staying here anymore. You want to do things your way? Fine, but not under this roof. That moment felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My hands trembled as I packed the few things I had, but something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I did feel a burning determination. A voice deep inside told me that this was the moment I'd prove them wrong. They'd seen me as nothing, and now it was time to show them exactly what I was capable of. Little did they know, that was the day I began building my empire. And I wasn't going to stop until I was a millionaire, all while they had no idea what was happening right under their noses. Growing up in our house felt like being stuck in someone else's dream. My brother Tyler was everything they wanted in a child: athletic, popular, and always the center of attention. I was the opposite. I wasn't bad, but I was different. I didn't care about sports. I didn't care about the latest trends. And I definitely didn't care about following a strict set of rules. While Tyler got praise for every little achievement, I was quietly slipping through the cracks, quietly becoming the family's black sheep. My parents were both very successful in their own right. My father ran a large construction company, and my mother was a high-ranking corporate executive. They had worked hard to get where they were, and I think they had this idealized version of what they wanted for us. They wanted us to work hard, follow the same path they did, and succeed just like they did. For them, success was simple: a stable career, a house with a white picket fence, and kids who did what they were told. That was it. They didn't see the bigger picture, the dreams outside of a traditional job or career. They didn't understand how important it was to be passionate about something, anything, just to have a purpose that made you feel alive. But for me, this traditional idea of success felt like a cage. I'd be happy if I could escape the daily grind of their expectations and find something that lit a spark inside me. I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. But they didn't see it that way. To them, I was always going to be the underachiever, and I was okay with that. I was so used to being overlooked that it didn't bother me as much anymore. What did bother me was the constant comparisons to Tyler. He could do no wrong. He had the grades, the friends, the athletic achievements. They'd brag about him to anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one. I would spend hours at my desk, reading about entrepreneurship or searching for ways to make money, but it was never good enough. I remember one particular night sitting at the dinner table, quietly picking at my food while my parents went on and on about Tyler's latest sports win. I didn't really care about sports, but it was the constant, look at him that hurt. Tyler, you're really something, Dad would say, his voice full of pride. I don't know where we'd be without you, son. Meanwhile, I sat there, invisible. "What about me, Dad?" I asked once, breaking my silence. "What about the things I'm working on?" "Oh, you're just a kid. You'll figure it out," he said dismissively. The tone in his voice was enough to crush me. It was always, "You'll figure it out," with a hint of judgment behind it. But Tyler wasn't perfect. While he was their golden child, he had his flaws. He was arrogant, overly confident, and didn't appreciate the opportunities he had. He'd waste money on things he didn't need, play pranks, and treat others like they didn't matter. Despite his popularity, I knew he wasn't as humble or kind as they thought. And that's when it hit me. My parents' idea of perfection was all about appearances. They wanted someone who was successful in the most conventional way. Tyler fit the mold. I didn't. It wasn't just that they didn't understand my dreams. It was that they didn't even try to understand them. They were too busy comparing me to Tyler, and no matter what I did, it was never enough. Things came to a boiling point when they found out about the startup idea I had been working on for months. I had been using my free time to research how to create a business, and I even saved up a small amount of money to launch it out. Yeah. It was an online venture. Nothing too fancy, but something that could eventually make a significant impact. I was so excited to finally share it with them. "Mom, Dad, I've been working on something," I said one evening, gathering my courage. "It's a business idea I've been building, and I really think it could work." They were quiet for a long time, looking at each other like I'd just told them I'd sold everything to run away and join a circus. "Business?" my father asked, his tone cold. "You should be focusing on your studies, not some distraction." Just like you always say, stick to the plan. I was trying to be calm, but the frustration was starting to build. "But I'm not happy with that plan. I want to do something more." My mother's face twisted with concern, but it wasn't the kind of concern I was hoping for. "This is what you've been focusing on instead of school? Instead of preparing for a future?" That's when I realized they weren't just disappointed in me. They didn't care about my dreams at all. It was about their version of success, not mine. The tension between us grew. It became unbearable. They kept pushing me to follow their path, to play it safe. They told me that starting my own business was too risky and not worth the time. All the while, Tyler kept being praised for his success. I remember sitting in my room one night, staring at the wall, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I couldn't stay here any longer. I couldn't live in a house where my worth was measured against someone else. It was to me to break free, even if it meant going down a road they would never understand. That was when I decided I would make it without them. I wouldn't just find success on their terms, I would find success on mine. And I'd prove that I was capable of more than they ever gave me credit for. I'd like to say that after leaving, I immediately jumped into my entrepreneurial dream with everything I had. But the truth is, it wasn't as easy as packing up my bags and starting a business. In fact, the first few months after my parents kicked me out were a blur of uncertainty. I had nowhere to live and barely enough savings to keep me afloat. The world felt huge, and I was scared. But at the same time, there was this tiny spark deep inside me, reminding me of why I had to prove myself. I had to show them. I had to prove that their rejection wouldn't define me. The first few weeks were a struggle. I couch surfed with a few friends, borrowing their spare rooms while I figured out my next move. I'd work odd jobs, mostly freelance gigs or selling things I didn't need. It wasn't glamorous, but I wasn't worried. I had a plan, and that plan was starting to take shape. But it wasn't just about building a business anymore. I realized I wanted more than success. I wanted to rub it in their faces. Every time I thought about how my parents treated me, how they dismissed my dreams, it made me more determined. I wasn't just going to prove that I could make it, I was going to make it so big they would have no choice but to eat their words. The turning point came when I was doing some freelance web design for a small startup. I had a natural eye for marketing, and one of the guys at the startup suggested I look into digital marketing for business owners. It clicked. I realized that I could make a real income by helping businesses get noticed online. I immediately threw myself into learning everything I could about SEO, ads, and digital strategies. I spent hours at coffee shops, reading articles and watching videos on how to set up online campaigns. I was obsessed. I started offering my services to small businesses around town. Some said yes, others laughed in my face, but I didn't stop. Each rejection felt like a challenge, and each small success fueled me even more. It was slow at first. One client, then two. I was making enough to survive, but that wasn't enough. I wanted more. I needed to grow faster. One night, while researching new strategies, I stumbled across something that would change everything. I was deep into online marketing forums when I came across a post by someone who had successfully built an online business using a model that I had never considered. It was bold, using a combination of influencer marketing and high-ticket items. It was a strategy that was risky but could potentially scale fast, the kind of business model that, if done right, could make millions. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. This was it, the breakthrough I needed. But I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the connections or the network. I was just a kid with a dream and some skills. However, that didn't stop me from making a plan. I began to invest every penny I earned into the business model I'd learned about. I hired a few freelance experts who knew the ropes and could help me scale faster. I ran ad campaigns like a madman, reaching out to influencers who might promote my products. Each step felt like a risk, but it also felt like my only shot at hitting it big. While I was hustling on my side project, something interesting started happening. My parents, still oblivious to what I was doing, began to notice my social media accounts blowing up. I wasn't trying to flaunt anything, but I had been posting about the small victories in my journey, the occasional client success, the deals I closed, the new business partnerships. My parents never commented or acknowledged anything, but I could feel the shift. They were starting to see that I wasn't just a failure. I wasn't the dreamer who sat around doing nothing. Slowly, they started following me on social media. I caught them liking a few of my posts. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that something had clicked in their minds. They were watching me, and they had no idea how close I was to making it. Then I got the call that would change everything. It was a random message from a former classmate who had started his own company. He'd seen my posts and wanted to talk about a potential collaboration. After some back and forth, I realized that he had a huge following and influence in the market I was targeting. This was a game changer. I signed a deal to work together with an agreement to take a cut of the sales from our campaigns. This collaboration meant I had a real shot at breaking through. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at the contract and wondering if this was truly happening. I was going to make my first real step into the big leagues. I was finally getting the kind of recognition that had always seemed out of reach. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't just going to succeed, I was going to make them see. I wasn't going to be the failure they thought I was. I was going to be the one that showed them how wrong they had been. While I was busy planning and strategizing my way to the top, my parents were still completely unaware of what was happening. They still thought I was just figuring things out, playing around with random ideas. But I knew something they didn't. I was on the edge of something huge, and they had no clue. The day everything came together was like a wave crashing down. It was a mix of emotions, pride, excitement, and a touch of vengeance. I had finally made it. Months of hard work, risk-taking, and sleepless nights had led me to the moment where I could now confidently say I was a success. And the best part? My parents still had no clue what was coming. By now, my digital marketing business had exploded. The collaboration with my classmate had taken off beyond anything I could have imagined. We were bringing in massive amounts of revenue. I was making more money than I ever thought was possible in such a short time. I had built a solid reputation, and doors that were once closed to me were now wide open. I had also reached a point where I had built a team, people who worked with me, believed in my vision, and shared in the success. What had started as a one-man operation was now a growing empire, and I was just getting started. I was doing everything they said I couldn't. And the best part? My parents had no idea what I was doing, even though they'd been watching from the sidelines. But then, one night, I got a call from my father. "Hey, how's everything going?" His voice was hesitant, like he didn't know what to say next. "We've been seeing your posts online. Things are going well?" It was clear they had no idea the scale of what I was actually doing. They had no idea that their son was now a millionaire in his own right, far beyond anything they could have imagined for me. I could tell they were trying to figure out how to navigate the awkwardness, how to pretend that everything was normal despite the fact that their son had done exactly what they had thought was impossible. I smiled. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment where they would finally know the truth. "Yeah, things are going really well, Dad," I said, keeping my tone casual. "I'm doing great. Actually, I've been so busy, I barely have time to keep up with everything." There was a long pause. I knew he was processing what I just said, trying to figure out if this was some sort of joke, but I wasn't joking. I had done what they told me was impossible, what they didn't think was worth pursuing. I could hear the hesitation in his voice as he spoke again. "Well, that's good to hear. You know, we're proud of you, even if it's not the way we imagined." I could feel the unease radiating through the phone, but I wasn't ready to let them off the hook that easily. I knew they'd always been proud of Tyler's path, always so quick to praise him for his success, but now it was my turn. My voice was steady. When I replied, "Thanks, Dad. I think you'll be proud of the direction I'm going. I've built something big. It's paying off, more than I ever thought it would." And just like that, I dropped the bombshell. I waited for a moment of silence, and then finally my father's voice came back, slightly shaky. "What are you talking about?" It was time. "I'm a millionaire now, Dad. I've been making my own money, running my own business. You know that little project I started? It's turned into something huge, a lot bigger than you thought." I could hear his breath catch on the other end. He wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't prepared for the shift that happened in that moment. The next few seconds felt like an eternity. But in those moments, I saw everything I needed to see. His entire perspective of me was shifting. I had proven that I was capable of achieving success without their approval or their support. I had done it on my own, and now I was sitting on top of the world. "What?" My father's voice broke the silence. How did you do that? How did you build all this?" I couldn't hide the satisfaction in my voice as I replied, "I just did it." I didn't listen to anyone telling me it was impossible. I took risks, and I worked harder than I ever have in my life. And now I've built something incredible. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about finally feeling seen, heard, and respected by the people who had dismissed me for so long. I wasn't just their failure. I wasn't just the person they had brushed aside. I was a force to be reckoned with. And now they had no choice but to see it. The conversation didn't last long after that. My father, for the first time in my life, didn't have anything to say. The words of congratulations that never came. The proud pats on the back that were never given. All of it evaporated in the air, leaving only the truth. I had done it on my own. I had taken everything they said I couldn't do, and I had turned it into a reality. After that call with my father, everything changed. It was like the floodgates opened, and I finally felt the weight I'd been carrying for years begin to lift. My parents had finally acknowledged that I wasn't a failure. I could sense the awkwardness in their voices whenever we spoke after that. Like they didn't quite know how to handle the fact that their son had outgrown their expectations. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had moved on. My business continued to thrive. I had set up systems, expanded my team, and started bringing in a steady stream of high-paying clients. My life, which had once felt like a series of missteps and disappointments, was now full of opportunities. I didn't just have the financial freedom I'd always dreamed of. I had control over my time, my future, and my decisions. I could go where I wanted, do what I wanted, and most importantly, I no longer had to answer to anyone. I knew that my parents, despite their initial surprise, couldn't fully grasp what had happened. They had always seen success in a very particular light, and I had shattered that image. They couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that I'd become successful by following my own path, not by adhering to their expectations. The truth was, I didn't need their approval anymore. In fact, I didn't even want it. The truth hit harder for them when they realized how deeply I had changed. They reached out occasionally, trying to have regular conversations, but I was different now. I wasn't the kid who needed validation from them anymore. The emotional distance between us had grown, and I could feel it. I was moving on, building a new life, forging new relationships with people who understood what I was trying to do. But even though I didn't need them, I didn't want to completely shut them out. I knew that their love for me had always been there, hidden behind their own insecurities, their need to control, their own unspoken expectations. One day, after several months of silence, I invited them over to my new office, a sleek, modern space I had set up with my team. They were hesitant at first, unsure of how to approach the situation. When they walked in, they were taken aback by the transformation. My office wasn't just a workspace, it was a symbol of everything I had achieved, and it hit them hard. They could see it now, all laid out in front of them. I had built this life on my own, without them. "Wow," my mom said, looking around. Her eyes lingered on a framed photo of my team at a recent event I'd hosted. "You really did it, didn't you?" I could feel the tension in the air, the awkwardness, but there was something different now. There was no condescension, no subtle dismissal. I wasn't the failure anymore. I was their equal, and they had to reckon with that. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I told you I'd make it." The words felt empowering, but they didn't have the sting they might have before. They didn't need to. I had already moved on. It was clear my parents were still processing the full weight of what had happened, but I didn't hold it against them. The bitterness I'd once felt had faded away, replaced with a deeper understanding. They had their own limitations, just like I had mine. It was time for me to live my life on my terms, and that meant learning to forgive, learning to let go, and learning to stand on my own. As time passed, I saw them making efforts to connect more, to understand me and what I had built. The conversations grew less strained. It was clear they still wanted to be a part of my life, but they were no longer trying to control me. They had seen firsthand that I could succeed without their input. And maybe, just maybe, they were starting to respect me for it. But that didn't mean I was going to forget everything. I wasn't going to forget how they treated me in the past, how they cast me aside. That pain wouldn't disappear overnight, but I didn't need their approval anymore. I was my own person, standing on my own 2 feet. And that was enough for me. Eventually, they realized it too. They saw that my success wasn't just a personal victory, it was a testament to the fact that you don't have to fit into anyone's mold to make it. I didn't follow the traditional path they wanted for me, and I didn't let their doubts stop me from chasing my dreams. One last attempt from my parents came a few months after the office visit. They asked me if I wanted to come to dinner, and I agreed. It wasn't awkward this time. They weren't trying to guilt trip me or make me feel like I owe them anything. It was just a simple dinner. As we sat there, eating and talking, I could see the change in them. "We're proud of you," my dad said in a way I had never heard before. It wasn't about their expectations anymore. It wasn't about them. It was about me and what I had achieved. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally seen for who I was. That night, I walked out of their house feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I had made it. I was in control of my life, my future, and I was finally free from the chains that had once bound me.